If you've seen this game, and if you've seen the price tag, you're maybe wondering, is it worth it?
One of the biggest boundaries to buying Foundations of Rome is the cost. As of the recording of this video, you can get it on Arcane Wonders website from between 230 and 310, depending on if you want the Emperor level, the Maximus level, and depending on if you want the Sun Drops, which is washes that they put on the pieces. And quite frankly, this is actually better than it's been in a while. Right after it finished its second printing on Kickstarter, the resale market was the only way you could get it. And quite frankly, it was really hard to find reasonably priced things for it. Now, Foundations of Rome is a really interesting game in that I love it and I think it's really fun to play. But there are not a lot of games where there's this very expensive version or there's a much cheaper version with virtually the same gameplay. So one of the really big selling points for Foundations of Rome, if you like detailed components, then Foundations of Rome is going to be much better for you than Foundations of Metropolis. Foundations of Rome has these nice 3D pieces that just look really good when you finish building the city. And Foundations of Metropolis, all the pieces are, basically cardboard. The money's cardboard, whereas in Foundations of Rome, you get really good metal coins, which are really nice. So part of the question on if you should get Foundations of Rome or Foundations of Metropolis is dependent on whether or not you're somebody who cares about the components of a game or you just strictly like the gameplay. Now, I said before that they virtually have the same gameplay, and that is true for the base game, that Foundations of Rome and Foundations of Metropolis have the same game mechanics and virtually the same gameplay. But there are a few differences to note. The most obvious one is Foundations of Metropolis, at least right now, it's a 4-player game. Whereas if you have Foundations of Rome, the Emperor, or better, it is 1 to 5 players. That might not seem like a big deal, but at least in my case, there's a lot of times where we have game nights and we have 5 people. Sometimes we have 6, 7, 8, whatever, but there are so many games that I love, but only play up to 4 people, and we often have a 5th person. Now, the other thing to note is, at least right now, Foundations of Metropolis, it's just the base game. Whereas another reason to consider Foundations of Rome is the Roads of Fortune expansion. Now, this adds a number of things, it adds some quality of life things, but it also adds other elements to the game that make the game fun, such as bonus points for building along the edge and other components like that, that just adds another element to the game. Now, I think the base game for Foundations of Rome, and then by default for Foundations of Metropolis, is really fun and has a lot of replay value. Both games are mechanically really easy to pick up, but I think hard to master. And even if you feel like you do master it, it's really dependent on how other people are playing. So you don't necessarily need the expansion to make it more fun, but there are some things that the expansion adds which just make the game really good. So the differences really come down to those kind of 2 categories. The first category being, do you care about quality components? Because I'll tell you what, I said this once and I'll say it again, the end of a game of Foundations of Rome looks really awesome. Like, it is fun to play and to build the city and look afterwards and see all the different things, and that's just a beautiful part of the game. But if you don't care about components and all that matters to you is gameplay, you might lean towards Foundations of Metropolis. On the other hand, I don't know if Arcane Wonders is going to produce expansions for that game. The expansion Roads of Fortune, it's really fun. It's added some things to the game. There are other things in Foundations of Rome that I don't know the plans for Foundations of Metropolis. I can't say for certain. For me, it seems like they're not necessarily going to build expansions for that game, or maybe not as soon. I could be totally wrong, and they could be thinking anything we're going to make for Foundations of Rome, we're going to make for Foundations of Metropolis. But that's just hard to say at this point.
Let me know, do you think Foundations of Rome is worth it, or would you stick with Foundations of Metropolis?